everybody. Welcome to Porn-Free Millennial. We have a returning guest, the first returning guest on the show. Fan favorite, my little brother, best friend, Noah. Noah, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be back. Thanks for having me back, Mac.
No problem. And for all you that have not seen Noah's first episode with us, it's episode 13, Breaking Free Together, the powerful role of brotherhood in recovery. So in that prior episode, we talked about brotherhood, like us being brothers, our relationship together, our relationship with porn, and how we've actually been working together to get that out of our lives and to move towards, a more holistic lifestyle of healing and growth and happiness. So happy to have you on today, Noah. Today we're going to be talking about FASTT Check-ins. So FASTT Check-ins are a huge part of our recovery. It's an acronym. We'll go over it in a second, but it was actually developed by Dr. Milton Magness for sex addicts and their partners after there was disclosure. And I first heard about this tool, this strategy from Porn-Free Radio host. I know I'm getting that caught in now. Porn-Free Radio host. His name's Matt Dobschutz. He's been doing I think his podcast now for like over 10 years.
Yeah,
absolute just pro. Great podcast too. It's Porn-Free Radio. That was the first porn-free podcast I ever listened to and really inspired me. But he has an episode where he talks about FASTT check-ins, and it's a great one. I'll put it in the show notes. I'm looking right now. I think I might have it pulled up. It's episode 106 on Porn-Free Radio, and it's fantastic. I also have an episode 2 on my podcast, and I think this episode that I have, I'm pulling it up right now, it is called FASTT Check-ins, and that episode is episode 7 for me. But this is me and Noah talking about how we do it together. It's basically an acronym. And Noah, do you just want to go through just the acronym names, and then we're going to go through each one by one and how we approach it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. I think when I first listened to it with Dobschutz as well, I was like, what do they stand for again and stuff? So I think it would be good to hammer that home a few times. Yeah. So F is for feelings.
Yeah.
A is for activities in recovery. S is for slips or sobriety. T is for threats. And then T is for tools. So 2 T's. And Mac and I really refined this over time. So I think that we can give some really practical tips. Mac and I probably use this for the past, like 370 something days or 400 days or something. So I think we've applied it a lot in the field.
Yeah, and what it looks like in all practicality is Noah and I every day will send voice memos to each other where we'll go through the FASTT check-in with each other. So basically how it kind of goes would be like, I would send one off. Typically we do it around like the afternoon time.
Mm-hmm.
There's some days like where things get busy, we have meetings, like work's really busy, or maybe it's a weekend activity. We normally just kind of plan ahead. We text each other. But typically like one of us initiates it, where like Noah might send his first and then I get it. And then, but basically what I do is I listen to Noah and his FASTT check-in, and then I give him feedback on it. So I'm basically just letting you know, like, hey, Noah, like giving you encouragement, maybe some tips, things that, I picked up while you're going. And as you do your FASTT check-ins with somebody, you're going to be building like a relationship with them, basically. So it's kind of cool. Like Noah and I have been, I think you're 7 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Basically. And, we've been best friends, throughout our whole life. Maybe at times, not the best as of friends, because Noah used to pick on me. Fun fact.
What?
Noah one time threw a broom and hit me after a trampoline.
Off the trampoline.
Yeah, Noah
far away.
Yeah, it was a far away sniper shot.
Spun end over end like a helicopter blade.
Yeah.
Back.
But honestly, not enemies. I mean, that's just what brothers do to each other.
Yeah.
Scrap a little bit. But anyways, I think over time, like doing these FASTT check-ins with each other the last year, like when you say that, like we've grown like so much closer.
Big time. And I remember I was talking about that on that first podcast we did, and just how the recovery and this shared plight, that we have has brought us closer together, big time.
Yeah.
Great.
So I think that's something just to look forward to. Like when you're doing the fast check-in with somebody, I would say that you trust somebody that's going through the same thing as you, that has a similar goal to you. Just know that, you're gonna get what you put into it. But if you commit to it, you can really build a very strong relationship with that person. And they don't have to be your brother, they don't have to be your relative, even your friend. They could be somebody that you meet like through a group. Uh, it could be like, I know there's Porn Addicts Anonymous, which we've talked about before. There's ways that you can do that with people and build that community, build that relationship. So it's a great strategy. And what we're going to do, and Noah, did you have a thought there?
Yeah, yeah, because it's also I believe that Dr. Magness, who developed it, that it also was a tool for them to share with their wives, to
Great.
uplift
Yeah.
them. Yeah, which is really interesting. And we've talked about this before, and I think generally, like, it's not. And I think you talked about it with Vern Tonke, who you recently had on. I loved that podcast. If anyone hasn't listened to that, go listen to that one. Vern's another big name in the recovery community who's just had some awesome podcasts and wisdom.
That's a Finding Traction podcast that
Yeah,
he's on.
yep, yep. Um, but yeah, like we don't want to involve our partners maybe as much as our accountability partners, and stuff like that. But the fast check-in can be a great way to let someone know, to give them a quick sense of how you're doing, and of course the acronym itself is FAST, so it's meant to be quick. And Mac and I happen to do it every day, is what we decided. And we decided that's what we needed to do. And we committed, though, you could do it with someone else at a different frequency.
Yeah.
But
Great point, Noah.
that's all I want to say.
All right. So do you want to? I think I'm going to share my screen really quick for this first part. We're going to go over feelings, and I'll include this like in the show notes just so people have a reference to it. But this is a feelings wheel. And this was, I think got this from Vern going through his Finding Traction course. And then I believe it was based off of Marshall Rosenberg, based on I think it's from their book, and I actually have heard about this book. It's called Nonviolent Communication, which is actually an interesting title. But I think I heard about this actually in my men's group. And do you see my screen, Noah?
Yeah, I do. Uh-huh.
Okay, let me just make sure it's up. Okay, is it still good?
Yeah.
And guys, if you're listening, sorry, we have this on video too. So if you want to check out the video, it's on X or on YouTube. But basically, what we have here is a feelings wheel. And Noah, I know sometimes when we do our check-ins, the feelings part can actually get a little wonky. Like we could be all over the place sometimes, and I know I've been there before. Still do that at times. Do you want to walk us through this a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I think we can have a tendency as men, or people who, struggle with addictions and stuff. And at least speaking for myself, it can be hard to name emotions. And the way that we've used porn, I think, at least I have, is to deal with uncomfortable emotions, to cope with uncomfortable emotions. And something I'll say too that has really changed in my thinking about emotions is not thinking of them as positive or negative.
Mm,
They're just emotions. Some of them are maybe more difficult and uncomfortable to deal with, but they're just emotions, and they come with their own messages. And it's important to identify, like, what is the emotion, and to get comfortable naming that. And I know, like, once I started to get sober and started to get in recovery was when I could actually start to feel my emotions, and actually try to get to know them. And Mac and I talked about this last podcast about how porn can stunt your emotional maturity and your growth. And you might stay in some of these big emotions of, like, where you can get angry and dysregulated, out of control, or just really anxious. And you're kind of putting a lid on your emotions with the porn,
right.
suppressing it, take it off, and they're all big and stuff. You don't know how to handle it. And you think that all this stuff is so hard to handle, but over time it can get easier. I don't want to ramble too much, but just talking about
Great
how
point.
yeah, naming these emotions is it's a helpful part of self-awareness, and letting someone else know and communicating with someone else is how I'm feeling. They can know kind of where you're coming from. And it gives us paints a great picture in this check-in to show somebody of like, this is what's going on my day, this is how I'm feeling, and given that I'm feeling this way, why am I feeling this way? If you're feeling good, is there anything you're doing that's making you feel good? Or what are things that are doing that? Like, what are some things that are making you feel more of these more pleasant emotions? And or what are the things leading to these unpleasant things? And you know, what are you going to kind of do here in this situation? Because in the past,
Yeah, great point.
so
Yeah, great point. And I think like looking at the screen too, uh these like inner emotions can kind of help you like link to maybe something more specific depending on like, where you're at. I know like maybe a common one maybe that I share would be like, hey, like I'm tired. Yeah, I feel
yeah, I
maybe
share
burnt
that.
out, right? Like that's a common one. Maybe if we're kind of more on that side where our needs aren't really being met, kind of feel a little drained. And then maybe on the opposite side, right, you could be feeling like really good, like feeling like you're firing on all cylinders. I think maybe a good word for that, a common one maybe that you and I share is like feeling confident, feeling like maybe peaceful,
Yeah,
that you're at
productive
peace.
or something.
Uh,
Yeah. Hmm.
so it's good to, and it takes time, right? Like when you first start with somebody, it's going to flow a little bit, but I think like this feeling wheel can really like help out, just help you kind of start to map it out and isolate it.
Yeah.
Because then that kind of helps you with the fast checking because it's a good place to start. It kind of sets the tone a little bit for where you're at. So good. Anything else that you wanted to share with the feeling wheel or just feelings in general?
No, I think that's good what you said too, because in getting us to kind of connect with that part of ourselves is really important because we can get cut
Mm,
off from it. So I think Mac and I have encouraged each other to get beyond like saying like, "Oh, I'm tired," or something like that, and get deeper in. Explain the feelings, and that's why it's important, as Mac was talking about, like of having someone you trust and stuff, and being able to build this because it can be hard sometimes to tell people how you're feeling. It's really important.
yeah, I really love what you had to share there. It's like sharing with intention and really truly thinking about how you feel.
Yeah, it makes you check in with yourself, you know?
Yeah, because like before I call you and I send my voice memo, I have to kind of do a little inventory of myself,
Mhm.
which I
Yeah,
love that. Because if you're
yeah,
doing that every day, like, that's gonna really help you grow if you're because it may be to expand. I know we're kind of expanding on it, but I think this will be helpful. Is I think like that inventory and getting deep and checking in with yourself. That's something that typically I know me as I've been struggling with porn addiction or porn addiction or that relationship with porn that's problematic for a long time in my life. You don't have those kind of thoughts when you're in the middle of it. Like you're just kind of numbing out or you're like you said kind of putting a lid on things. And in this human experience, it's too special to just gloss over those things or to put them in a lid, right? Like this is our experience, right? And I think part of what we talked about, I think last time was seeing things through a different lens. And I think when you go through these fast check-ins, you start to develop this rhythm with whoever you're doing it with, or even if you're doing it on your own to start out with, and you're just doing inventory, it's kind of a practice that helps you take the lid off a little bit, and it lets you kind of sit in those emotions, right? And you can kind of, and it's okay. It's okay to say, hey, no, like I'm so freaking tired today, man. Like
yeah,
I'm worn out, and just to be able to share that with somebody is phenomenal. It really can help you just get the lid off of it,
yeah. Or I'm
right?
angry, I'm pissed off. This thing happened. Like, you know?
Right, exactly. And
Yeah,
just sharing it, being a little bit raw. So
yeah,
really good stuff. And I mean, you and me, we've gone through different stages of that. It can
sure.
change on a day to day basis, and we've never said, "Hey, Noah, like what you're feeling, you shouldn't feel that way." Never that. And I think that's a big part of it too. When you're working with someone that you trust, there's no judgment. There's no judgment at all. It's just listening to somebody and having the ability to be heard is huge. So that's a huge part of who you select, who you work with. So that's feeling. Let's dive into, if you're ready, activities and recovery. So this, I don't know if I'd like pick like a favorite one to talk about, but I kind of feel like activities and recovery is the one like typically I'm like the most excited to talk about when
Hmm.
we're checking in,
Yeah,
because you know, like,
like
and
that one.
yeah, I don't know, maybe you feel the same way about it, but uh, I would definitely say like activities and recovery are things that are moving you towards something that's positive in your life. It's moving you away from this relationship with porn. These are like healthy activities, healthy habits, things that you're like passionate about, things that can like connect you with other people, connect you with yourself, connect you with, if you do believe in a higher power, that higher power, right? And it can also connect you just to things that are healthy for you, like for your body, right? For your physicality.
Yeah.
Uh, so I was kind of thinking, you know, maybe Noah, you can share with us or with the group, the audience, just like an activity in recovery that you've really latched onto lately.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd wager that Mac and I's activities in our lives have and our hobbies and all these things have become more rich along the way in our recovery, and that's been true for me. One of the things I started doing, Mac and I really started doing these check-ins in February of last year, so it's been over a year now.
Right.
I started playing rugby in March, so that became an outlet for me. It became something fun, and I think this is something Matt Dobshoot said on his podcast, but it was like he would look at someone's calendar of like different activities they were trying to do, you know, or whatever, and it was like this looks kind of boring. Like your recovery looks boring. Like what are you doing? Like
Right.
what are you doing for fun? Like what are your passions? What are your hobbies? Like are you like he's like host a party, like do something like fun, and involve other people. And Mac has a way of thinking about it that he can share about too if he wants around passions or those sorts of things, relationships.
Yeah.
But yeah, like rugby became a big thing for me. But of course, like activities in recovery, like you can think of like at the forefront, like those primary things, like I'm going to group tonight, or I'm gonna see my coach or my therapist, or my accountability partner. I'm gonna check in with them. Like
Right.
Mac and I, we always have that. That's always an activity in recovery for Mac and I is our check-in. We always have that at least. But we're checking in within that check-in of like I'm gonna meditate later, or I'm gonna pray, or I'm gonna watch a show, or like some things can kind of fit in there in some ways. Like maybe watching a show, maybe not. But sometimes if it's like I'm feeling stressed and we've checked that into the feelings area,
Right.
our activities we might share might be along those lines, but they can flow together like that. But anyway, that's kind of what I think on some
No,
of
I
that.
love it. Yeah, that's good stuff. So I think like while you're listening, while you're thinking about it, something that's really helped me out and something that's a part of like Vern, like working with Vern Tomke and his Finding Traction course, which I'm doing right now with a group of guys. Part of it is active commitments. And I think these play into like activities in recovery. I'm not going to go into all of them in depth, but really it's like as you're listening, think about this. If you're really struggling, like Noah is saying, like to really have something where you're like, yeah, that's fun. Like if you were telling somebody, hey, these are the things I like to do, someone be like, wow, that's awesome. Like you sound really passionate about it. Like you sound like you're having a good time. If you're really struggling with that, that could be like a major part of like the cyclical nature of porn in your life, because typically it's going to fill in that missing void, right? Because it's always there. You can go to whoever you want anytime and you're gonna get that satisfaction. That's kind of like the role that sometimes porn can play for us. At least for me, I can say that is it filled like this void, like where I didn't have anything else going on for me, it seemed like, right? And but I think Matt also, and again, Matt has a phenomenal podcast, Porn Free Radio. I think what he said at one point was, like where it sometimes it seems like the most interesting thing about you is like your relationship with porn. There's something like that. And I thought that really hit me hard is like, if you can't find anything in your mind, this is the practice that you got to think about. So there's four tenets here. In the middle, just think about like a big circle. I don't have this on my screen right now, but in the middle of the circle is recovery. Like this is your holistic recovery. There's four things that play into it. And this is kind of what Noah was touching on too. So you have your spiritual health. So that could be, if you do believe in a higher power or not, it's connecting, with nature, connecting with your God, connecting with something above yourself. I mean, that's a big part of like Alcoholics Anonymous, Porn Addicts Anonymous. Is like that's like the first step, right? Is connecting with that higher power. Number two is your physical health. So, are you getting good sleep? Are you working out? Are you doing things that are healthy for you? That can really play into your recovery, into your activities as well as your energy levels. Like, are you taking care of yourself? Number three would be your relationships. So, like, do you have community in your activities? Like Noah was sharing, he does rugby. Rugby, and I've played a little bit. Rugby is a very social sport. It's a great sport. A lot of time you end up in a pub, right, Noah?
Yeah, that's right.
I think
Yep.
rugby is the only sport. I was playing at a Renaissance festival once with our uncle and my old high school basketball coach. And at halftime, they had a cake. That's the only sport where at halftime you can go get a beer, which is pretty cool. So, anyways, that's like relational, right? Like doing something that can connect you with others. That could also be group, right? That could also be your check-ins where you're
Yeah.
doing a fast check-in. That could be like your wife, your
Date
girlfriend,
nights.
your partner going on date nights, right? It could be family events. Really, the biggest thing is like, are you connecting with other people? Because the big thing about porn guys and girls, it isolates you. When you're in the heat of it and when it's got you, you're isolating yourself. I think I did an episode on the porn prison. You're like, you're
Yeah.
in that prison. You don't have any prison mates with you. It's just you. And a big part of breaking free from that is having a sense of community and relationships. So that's number three. And then number four is passions. What are you passionate about? And Noah, I would say passions for me, and let me know if you think, but that's like things you get lost in. You get lost in it. Time isn't even a thing.
Mm.
You lose track of time.
A flow state.
You're in a flow state. Something I would say for me is like fly fishing. Love it, man. Like you go out, or if I'm going hunting, it's just like I'm not even thinking about anything else. I'm just in the moment. I'm in the present. I'm just in love with the moment, right? And I'm just truly just experiencing it, and I'm embracing it, right? I could say probably for you, man, it's get on the rugby field, man, and knocking some heads around, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely one of them. It's very important to at least have one of those things. The guy who came up with the flow state, Polish psychologist, that's how I'll name drop him because I don't think I can say his name and I don't have it offhand. But
Hey, maybe we can put it in the show notes if you can find it.
yeah, we can do that. But he says that it's the key to happiness, or it's crucial to happiness to have something that gets you in the flow state. And it for depression, anxiety, and like this porn prison, you need
Right.
something that's going to shake it up. I think a flow state is like a wrecking ball through the wall so that you can like get out of there for a second. It like that'll just get you transport you out of there for a sec and maybe give you a fresh perspective. Like you might be able to look back and be like, oh, I haven't even thought about that. I haven't even thought about the fact that I'm in this porn addiction and all this other stuff. You've changed
Exactly.
your state. So yeah, it's great for that. And I think that's a great way to talk about passions, Mac.
Yeah, and I think one additional thing to add on, and this is something that Vern had in one of his recent. He has another podcast called Pastors on Porn because he's also a pastor. But it was talking about a book called Surfing for God, I think it's called. But basically, it was a great quote that was shared. It was basically saying the moment that when it all changes is like when your passion for God or your passion outgrows your passion for porn.
Mm. Mm.
To where, because like people, I see it online. People defend it. Like I used to kind of defend it, right? Like
Yeah.
is like it serves some kind of purpose for me. And like you get defensive, you're like, oh, like that's mine. Like
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Some of that. Yeah, for
and
sure.
yeah, and I wanted to hit on that just because like you got to like find something that you're more passionate about. That you're like, I'm like way more passionate about playing rugby. I'm way more passionate about fly fishing than I am about like sitting in the basement or sitting in my room in the dark and just being alone and then
Yeah.
being shameful about it.
And yeah, definitely. And just life in general. You've told
Right.
me that before, like embrace life, get out there. And that's what you're doing if you're living a sober life, is you're embracing like reality, which
Mm,
is scary sometimes.
Yeah.
for people, but it becomes less scary. Like I paradoxically, it becomes less scary as you move away from the thing that you thought helped you accept reality. That's
Yes.
the big lie is like life is so hard, like use me to help you get through it. And life is hard, but
Yes.
making it harder. And once you start to get out of porn, you realize these things are, and we talked about this last time. I won't go into we talked about all dopamine and all these other things, but like once you
Yes.
start to get free of that, I think you discover more and more passions, which discovered more and more about yourself. You might meet like-minded people with the same passions and you're making friends, community like rugby. I gained like 40 friends like right away. Or
Those are the
it,
best guys too. I mean, rugby guys are awesome.
they're awesome, but it can apply in so many other areas too, and
Exactly.
even just in your groups and like your recovery groups and the bonds you can form there, the bond you can form with an accountability partner or a mentor, as Mac and Vern talked about in their last podcast. Like, yeah, and I love how you brought that up, Mac. I think it does tie in a lot of these activities and uh, different has hopefully like people can think about that in different areas of your life, like how these activities, because like you want things that are just a quick hit of fun, because
Right.
that's porn can be that and was that
Right.
for us. It was like this is a
Mhm.
quick hit of instant pleasure. So you want some activities that are going to be like that. The flow state though, that takes a little bit of effort to arrive to wherever you need to go, to set up the canvas, to get your paint, to get get to the river, set up on you get in your waders. I don't fish, Max the fisherman, but those kind of things. But you need the quick hitters, you need some of the things to set up like the flow state, but then you need some purposeful activities. That's what Max talked
Yes.
about, maybe in that spiritual realm, but also like, yeah, that fulfillment, the purpose. Like what are the activities that you're doing in that way? Are you volunteering? Are you helping others? Are you
Mhm.
those are also activities in recovery too. So I think that, I guess, is why this is maybe our favorite category. And if we had a data of like to track,
Right.
what area we spend the most time talking about, it probably would be this one. And like
Yeah.
that's a pretty cool thing that you and I have that many activities that we're excited about, or that we want to do or that are fulfilling to us.
Yeah, and it's grown over time, right? Like maybe if you would have looked at us from a year ago, it might have been kind of different to way maybe we talked very briefly about activities. It takes a little bit of time, right? And I do think like passion is such a great like gateway into connecting you to all these different things. Like if you can find something that you're passionate about, that will link to spiritual health, that will link to physical health most likely, and that will link to your relationships is when
Mm-hmm.
you find that passion, right? Because then you can find communities of people that like to do it. Like I could find probably a fly fishing. Like I have friends that I love to fish with, right? Like, so hopefully that helped you guys like listening to that. But it's a very rich concept, and it can be very rich as you go. Like make it rich in your life. It should be something that is rich in your life. It's not this like I think sometimes when people hear like activities and recovery, it might sound maybe a little bit like, oh, like this is homework. If it's homework for you, you're not doing it right. It shouldn't be homework for you. I mean, maybe initially, and maybe that's a little too blunt, but I think it should become something that's a part of you, something that you enjoy, something that you're looking forward to. And that's like the fast check-in as well, is like I look forward to talking to Noah. Like I
Same.
look forward, and it's not always like the best things. Like like it's not always like, hey, like everything's great. Sometimes I look forward to sharing it with him because I know I'm gonna get something out of it. We're gonna figure out what's going on, and we're gonna like kind of solve it together and encourage each other, you know?
Yeah, and it's life too.
Yeah.
Recovery is life. Like we're in recovery
Yes.
really always. Like I don't think there's really an end to this, and I think Mac and I don't we don't ever really say like, yeah, I think we're good, man, or maybe after this month, like let's just stop doing this. Him and I never say that because it's like, it's life,
Yeah.
and I think that yeah, we've stepped into life, and I think that these check-ins help us, like I think just even organize our day and like gain new ideas. Mac and I bounce off ideas and advice, and we're listening to each other about our lives, and investing in each other's lives. So it's a special thing. It's a special thing. And I think there can be some activities that are you might need some maybe that are related to that homework area, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Like there is some work required, but it's not all work. And I think that's what we're saying is like it's a balance and you can't be really in either direction too far.
yeah.
So
I would say this, man, that's a good analogy. Instead of like imagining homework as like you're going to school for 8 hours and you're falling asleep, because that was what happened to me sometimes in school. You're going outside, you're chopping some wood for your fire. This is an important part of your life, and it can be work, right? It can be strenuous, it can push you, but ultimately, you're building up that wood for your fire to keep the fire going, right? You're chopping wood,
yeah, hey,
you're
this is a
chopping
nice,
wood.
yeah.
You're not sitting in the classroom, you're chopping some wood. All right. Uh, let's jump into slip sobriety. So this one, okay, this one's probably not going to be as fun, right, as activities in recovery. But I think it's really important, right? And this is probably the biggest part where we got to be really honest. We got to live honesty. And a big part of our problem with porn, right, inherently in it is not being honest, not being honest with ourselves, not being honest with others. And I've talked about it, I've written about it, but it's a huge part of it, right? Is inherently within porn. We're not like watching it out in the open. We're turning off the lights, we're closing the door, we're locking the door, we're deleting web history, we're lying, we're gaslighting. We don't want people to know. I've had times where I just wanted to take it to the grave with me and say, "This is the last time. I'm never gonna tell anyone about this." And that's a horrible way to live life. You almost become a shell of yourself if you commit to that. Now, on the flip side of it, when you commit to honesty, you can't lose. You can't. You can only learn, right? Uh, because at the end of the day, everything's going to come to light, no matter how hard. And I was pretty good at it, and then I became really bad at it, to where I became like the worst liar ever. Right? I think I used to be a good liar, to where I was pretty. People just like, oh yeah, I believe him, and then I became an awful liar, and got to the point to where I couldn't hide it anymore. It didn't serve me anywhere. It just made things worse. So S again is for slip sobriety, and it's going to take time. You're going to find your cadence with your partner, but I'd say the most important thing, like when you first start off, is just like identifying like what triggers you, or like maybe like what you're struggling with, and maybe that's somewhere that we can kind of go in this conversation is, like really start to identify like what are the things that you struggle with? Like, is it more like physical stuff? Is it more like physical touch? Is it because I know that's like something, or is it more like inward? And I think I've talked about this with Vern before. Like it's like inward or outward kind of slips. Like inward stuff's more like inside of you, maybe more like in secret. Outward might be like more out in the open kind of things. But what I would say to that is maybe I just identify what you struggle with. So like for me, like my big struggles, I think would mainly be like going on different kind of apps, kind of backdooring my way into things, maybe seeing something that's provocative that might kind of capture my attention, and then getting preoccupied with it and going back to it. And hopefully it kind of lands with some people. But it might be seeing like maybe someone attractive in public, or it could just be everywhere on social media. There's just, I think we call them thirst traps, right? There's everywhere, just things that are meant to catch your attention, and they're meant to hold your attention, right, and meant to like link you somewhere else. So it's identifying like a slip, and then identifying sobriety, and then no, I'll get your feedback really quick, but just to set the stage, something that's really helpful for me, and I think for a lot of people, is using kind of like a stoplight scenario, or a stoplight analogy. So you got your green light. Green light means like you're good, like you're flowing, things are working for you pretty well, you're doing well in your recovery, you're sticking to your active commitments, your active, your activities in recovery, you're feeling, more confident about things. I'd say yellow light more is like hazard caution. That means you're slipping a little bit. So that's like a slip is basically when you didn't quite cross like the red line. And a red line is like something that you set up for yourself to where you're like, hey, if I cross this line, that means I got to reset my sobriety. That means that I relapsed. And we'll get to that in a second. But yellow is like cautionary. It's like, hey, like if you keep going the way that you're going, like you're gonna cross the red line. And basically what that means is you run the red light. So that's the last part of it, is the red light. So you got green, yellow, you got red. Red is relapse. Red is your sobriety has come to an end at this point. You got to restart, right? And for me, and I think for you too, kind of the lines that we set is masturbation and porn. And I think with that, with for me at least for the red for porn is like I'm actively seeking it out. I'm consciously going into it. Masturbation and porn are kind of linked for me. That's how I see it, at least. Now, does that mean like if you're watching some show and something pops up and you look away or you keep going through it, you don't think about it again? You got to draw the line for yourself. It's different for every person. But for me personally, like I don't see that as a relapse. It's really like how am I reacting to it? Or how am I being proactive? Where does my mind go? Does my mind hang on it and then I have an action that's linked to it? Or is it like, hey, that stuff's going to happen sometime, especially in the world we live in? It's just everywhere. It's just moving past it. Be like, okay, saw that, moving on. And that takes time. But it takes time because you go through it in your fast check-ins, you talk about it. So Noah, hopefully that kind of helped maybe set up the stage, got some stuff clicking in your like that you wanted to talk about with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to mute myself because my dog was barking. This is the time of day when everyone starts walking their dogs outside.
No problem.
Um, but yeah, no, what as you're talking, what it makes me think about is how Mac and I over time have gotten a lot more nuanced, I think, with what we call slips. Mac and I, knock on wood, but it's not luck. Mac and I have worked really hard, but Mac and I have gotten a lot of sobriety, at least of like day counts and stuff like that. you know so like I'm up to day 116 for me, and Max just a little ahead of me,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
yeah, but so like, does that mean we have nothing to talk about and we're just like, and sometimes we say like, oh, no slips today really, and sometimes we might say that because
Right.
I think that genuinely there wasn't anything, but we more times than not are checking in that there was something. Maybe there was a girl at the gym or something like that maybe we thought about, or maybe we checked her out for too long, and like, or we were thinking about it, or kind of objectifying people, or something like that. That's a slip. It
Mm-hmm.
can lead somewhere. And I think
Right.
Mac over time and through seeing each other and getting each other's feedback have seen what series of slips can lead us to the big slip. And so I think that this one is something that over time you're going to have to play with and see like what counts as a slip for me. And as Max said, and he used the word relapse too, and what it counts as, that kind of thing, and where do you draw the line. But it also,
Mm-hmm.
I think that the slips is like thinking about like what is leading me there, and am I doing those things, even as nuanced as like overeating, because
Yeah.
that's can be kind of similar, or like drinking too much or other things like that. Like these are instant.
Scrolling.
Yeah, scrolling is something Mac checks in a good amount, too. So yeah, I think that all that stuff can kind of be in the realm of slips. In Porn Addicts Anonymous and in Sex Addicts Anonymous, and Porn Addicts Anonymous gets a lot from Sex Addicts Anonymous. And in their green book is what the Sex Addicts Anonymous book is. But it talks about circles and how the inner circle activities are the ones that are unsafe. They call it acting in because you're going inward in yourself. You're not acting out, you're acting inward when you engage in these behaviors. And I kind of like that. But they talked about circles and how the inner circle are the things that you absolutely like don't want to do and abstain from. Those are the biggest slip behaviors. Middle circle around that are things that you're unsure about that could lead
Right.
into the inner circle. Outer circle, things that are okay, like exercise, like things that are great, like those activities in recovery that Mac and I were talking about. So middle circle ones are great to check in. And then, of course, you have to check in and be honest about these inner circle things. Those are the
Right.
hardest things to get out there and be honest. Mac talked about that and talked about how we can become great liars and porn addiction can make us great liars. And I know that was me, and like living a lie and like portraying a false version of myself that basically everyone's going to think that I'm doing great because I have this crutch I'm leaning on that I can, anything negative I can just put off and I can numb it out here. That's how I think how I was. And, that's the sad, tragic thing about people that are really depressed, or people even are led to suicide, is you didn't know. That's what sometimes people say. It's like, oh, I would have never pictured that. And then, at least in this standpoint, I can see that from like, if, from at least my lens of things, like times I wasn't okay where I was relying on this crutch. So checking in these slips is a way to get current with your accountability partner or whoever you're checking in this fast check-in, and to be honest with yourself as well. And your partner to hold you accountable and be like, yeah, that does sound like a slip, or that maybe is a little bigger of a slip than you think it is, or is that leading somewhere? Or hey, and Max done this to me, like, hey, you've checked that in a few times now, like maybe we need to do something, or kind of intervene here. Or maybe this app is problematic, or maybe this situation is problematic, or you've been thinking about this a lot, you're preoccupied with it. Is it leading somewhere else? This seems like an escalation.
Mm-hmm.
So you that ability to track things there. So that's kind of what I was thinking about as you were sharing there.
Yeah, great points, Noah.
Yeah, and like that one more thought too on that inner circle too is like the reason they do that is like they want you to start off with the things that are the most impactful of your life. Maybe for porn it would be, did I watch it? Did I go to this website? And you put that behavior in the inner circle. Things maybe that you also care about, but maybe aren't as high as a priority, you can put in the middle circle. There's still things you don't want to do, but at event like you're stopping those problematic things. And then eventually you can put other things in that inner circle, but things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Like
makes sense.
The bigger slips and the smaller slips that can lead to that. Where's the line drawn? Yeah. So
yeah, and maybe something to end on. I mean, that's phenomenal what you just shared. It's never like you just wake up and it's just a random thing that happened. Like a random, like, oh, just randomly I had a relapse. There's cookie crumbs. There's or breadcrumbs, so to speak, right? And that's something that we learn, like, really when we start to like do recovery right. It's not just like everything was great and then it wasn't. There's typically slips that lead you down the slippery slope, so to speak, right? That you can look back on and say, oh, wow, like really, I started to relapse and like that seed started to get planted like back when blank, like back when I was just scrolling through social media unchecked at midnight. That could be something, right? That you could look at and say, oh, maybe if I put my phone in somewhere else, and we'll get to that, I guess, in a second, maybe that can help me so that I can break that cycle of slippage, right? So it can help you like identify things. It can help you kind of put together the data, so to speak, of like what's going on. And I'll just put a quick plug in for I Am Sober. It's an app. It's free. It's great. You can track your sobriety through that to the second, to where you can plug in, hey, this is my first sober day, and it'll track it to the second. And that's how Noah and I actually talk about, hey, like what our day counts are at. Is you can actually go there and I have a community as well. I'll put that in the show notes as well. That you can join up in my community and can be a part of it. It's great. You can also check in with yourself every day. There's actually a pledge you can take to say, hey, I'm going to be sober today. You can mark if you had a reset. If you're in a group, your group members will see, hey, like Noah had a reset today. And what that does is it helps pull people in that are a part of your community to say, hey, you doing all right? Check in with you. It's huge. It's huge because sometimes, we just want to hide it. We just want to bury it and say, I had this relapse. I don't want to talk about it. But as you go through the process, it helps you kind of reset faster. If you do have a big slip or something and you feel comfortable with who you're with, it helps you just get on track quicker, so to speak. All right, Noah, you good with sobriety with us? You want to move to the next T?
Oh, I think I think there may have been some last thoughts I had just around to like it's not all about day counts. It's about like your state of
For sure.
mind.
Oh yeah. It's a
And
day-to-day process, really, when you think about it.
definitely. And I think that's the biggest thing too, in a kind of an overarching theme. How bad is the barking? Can you hear that?
It's not bad.
Okay. But like an overarching theme is that you're in recovery, and just because your partner relapses or is even relapsing a lot, or they're in a state of relapse, doesn't mean that you stop being their accountability partner, or you like let them slip, or if both of you are slipping, like you still are just you can still check in, you know.
Sure.
But I know that this fast check-in has applicability in other areas, and that a lot of different relationships. But that's just one thing I wanted to say is that recovery is a process; it's progress and not perfection, and that's what That's why this is so important to keep doing these check-ins, keep checking these things. And if you fail, if you like fail again, fail better. Samuel Beckett, that quote. Like it's not failing unless like you just stop checking in, and you start withdrawing and isolating completely, and not reaching out to anybody,
Good
So
point, Nolan.
yeah.
That's a great point. So we'll move to threats. So threats could be things that are threatening your sobriety. So I would say when we're doing our check-ins, it's super important just to like think about, well, like what are the threats out there? Like what's like triggering me? And I think okay, I'll go over that for a second. So I would say for like threats, I think like a big part of it is what's like starting that preoccupation phase that you have to where you're starting to kind of start to build the ritual up of watching porn or masturbating, like what is the thing that gets that going, like what is the threat to your sobriety. I would say like a common one that I typically share is if I don't get like enough sleep, if I feel like really tired. I think that's a big threat for me, is just like when I feel like I don't have a lot of energy, where I feel like my eyes are really tired. That's oftentimes I feel like where I start to slip, is like when I'm really tired and like I'm not focused. Like I'm kind of like out of like the normal zone that I'm comfortable in, that like is like that flow state, right? I'm like really off of it. And that's oftentimes like the threat is I start to scroll on my phone more. I start to do things that are not really disciplined. And I think threats are things that kind of move you off of your active commitments, out of your activities in recovery. So it'd be like maybe like no, like you didn't get enough sleep, you don't feel that good. Maybe you drank too many beers the night before
Mhm.
with the rugby guys, and maybe there's practice that you got to go to the next day, but you're like, hey, I feel like crap. I'm not going to go. That's something can start to threaten your activities. Is maybe this lack of sleep, or maybe like we're kind of saying like overeating. It's kind of like the slips, like it kind of ties in with your slips a little bit, like the threats.
And it could tie in with the feelings too, as you're saying.
Yeah,
you
big time.
know tired tired still like kind of a feeling, but we're talking about emotions too. But yeah, like I'm feeling really anxious. Like it's a threat that I'm feeling this anxious, and like you know that's where we're going to get to the tools of how are we going to handle that. But
Right.
yeah, like as Max talking about that state that you're in, the vulnerability factors here that are out there, and we're talking about some internal ones too. But yeah, like a threat too, like of like, oh man, this stressful deadline's coming up. I'm stressing a lot about that. That's a threat, like to kind of to look out for. We're anticipating these,
Mm,
and that's the cool part about this check-in is like we're thinking about in the future. And since Mac and I check in daily, that threat can be a daily thing. Like, what's the threat today, and what's the tool I'm going to use to handle it today? It keeps things very manageable, but you can kind of game plan around it. But
yeah, that's a great point, man. And it could be like, I know, like for me, I think I shared before, like maybe taking on more responsibilities at work,
mhm.
like a big project that happened to me not too long ago, to where I'm already looking ahead and I'm like, okay, like this is going to be kind of stressful. This is going to take up some time. This is going to be like maybe like a little bit more like a high stress situation I'm going to be in. So like I can already look ahead and say that might be like a threat to me, because that's going to change up what I got going, like my flow. like it's kind of things that will break up your flow. Like if you could imagine like you being in a good flow where things are like you're in the green, what are things that could get you in the yellow? Like what are things that are threatening that are going to throw you off of your flow? Because I think that's what happens with our relationship with porn before, and I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with this. It's kind of like, oh, I'm tired, or oh, I'm stressed, or oh, I this happened, therefore I'm going to look at porn. Those are like the threats that happen that occur to where we react in the past by looking at porn. These threats that occur. Like I got this big project, I'm super stressed about it. Well, here's something that's going to help numb that stress. Here's what's going to put that stress in a lid is porn. These are threats. These are bombardments that are coming at you. So you got to look ahead at it and say, okay, I know this is going to be a threat. And then that's where we'll end as tools. But does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and one more thing too, I'll say is that the threats could also be as tangible as like I have this unaccountable time, like like my
Yeah.
spouse won't, or like I'm going to be alone tonight, and tonight is
Yeah. Right.
used to, or I'm going to be a threat is like in Mac and I have to pull back. At least I think Mac and I have to pull back to like the early days of when we were doing these check-ins all the time, and it was like we had certain apps on our phone that we maybe no longer have, or we have a certain
Right.
protections that weren't in place at that time. So that's it can also be a threat. Is I can check in like, oh, I have this app and like I have an urge to go on there and like are there some unsafe areas here, or that kind of thing, or I'm going to be like a threat is not going to bed at the same time as my partner. you
Oh,
know
that's a good one, dude. It's a
yeah, and
really good one.
that's yeah, again, to credit the king, Matt Dobschutz. That's his number one rule is going to bed at the same time as his wife. But it's like that can be a
Yeah.
threat. It's like a bad habit, of like I'm gonna do this thing, or so I think like you can really get pretty, the more I think nuanced you get and the more detailed you get with the threats, the more apt of a tool you can find, or the more detailed you can get with a tool that can solve that, and
Great.
to
You want to? You just want to segue into that then? Tools.
sure, yeah,
I'll
yeah,
let you
yeah.
take this one away.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think Mac and I remember us we've tweaked our check-ins, a good amount, but I remember in the beginning it was kind of like, oh, the tools are always the same. And I remember Mac
Hmm.
and that where it was like, oh, well, the tools is just this, and like I'm gonna keep doing this, and I'm gonna keep checking in with you, like that's kind of the tool. But over time, we evolved it into, and Mac can correct me if he thinks I'm wrong. We don't have any bylaws, or written rules on our check-ins, but
Yeah, I don't
it's
think
kind
we did like a blood oath or anything, right?
of but yeah,
Bloodkin.
uh, the the way I think about it is I'm checking in the threats to my recovery, and I'm going to check in the tools to address these threats.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
threat is like the anxiety I'm having about all these different deadlines. The tool I'm going to use is some mindfulness, some self-awareness, some tools to calm myself down.
Right.
And I kind of even I think of, and it sometimes it intertwines with activities in recovery, but maybe there are some of those more like homework items of the activities where I'm going to do this kind of moment to moment thing, or like a new habit or a new protection to put in place. If the threat is the unaccountable time, then
Right.
I'm going to use a tool of bookending, like
Hmm.
techniques. Like I'm going to bookend with Mac where it's like, hey, I have like this block of time. Like today, I had the day off. I could have messaged Mac in the beginning of the day, and I've done this before with different things. Like Mac, yeah, I'm alone now in the house. I'll call you if I need you, but I'm gonna let you know when I'm done, or like there can be other things like that. But that's a
Yeah.
very cool for that kind of situation. Or I'm gonna lock my phone up at night, or I'm gonna put it in airplane mode, or I'm gonna put it away, or I'm gonna turn it off. That's gonna be a new tool to put in place to deal with this threat.
Yeah, and like maybe this is a super practical one, right? Like that you shared is, and I think this is common with a lot of people, is like late night scrolling is a huge one, right? Not only is like the light not good for you and like your circadian rhythm and falling asleep, like that's normally why I can't sleep well, probably is because I'm on my phone
Yeah.
late at night, right? My eyes, it's not good for your eyes. Anyways, Um, Something that's really helped me out, and I'll admit, like I haven't been as good at this lately, but something that I need to get back to is just putting my phone literally physically like out of arm's reach from myself. Uh, when I'm really doing this the right way, and this is like me telling on myself, right? Because I've been bad at it lately, is like putting it like on the dresser, putting it maybe in another room. And then I like audiobooks. Like I'm a huge audiobook podcast guy. So typically, I mean, Noah and I, we grew up. This is a real quick story, which I love. But my parents, it was like me, my Noah, and my two sisters. We were all on the upstairs with my parents, and there was a hallway cassette player that also had a. I think it had a CD at one point. But my dad was able to put speakers in both rooms, and then we would listen to different books on tape. So part of some of the best ones were Series of Unfortunate Events, Harry Potter, of course, Frog and Toad by Arnold Lobel, and then I don't know if you remember the Mark Twain short stories. Those are
Yeah.
awesome. Those are great. But why I share that is like that was something that embedded in me, like what helped me sleep, I think. And it's kind of finding maybe some of those tools that you had like when you were a kid or growing up that maybe can soothe you, that you grew up with. And for me, like audiobooks, podcasts, it's almost like having like white noise on. Like it really can help me, and it helps. I feel like I'm kind of a hyperactive person sometimes, like where I need some of that stimulation, and it can just help fill that need to where instead of like scrolling mindlessly through things where you're kind of putting yourself in deeper water, you're putting yourself out there where you could come across something that could be triggering. Instead, you're putting your phone outside of arm's reach and you're just listening to something that can be really helpful. So that was just a tool I thought I would share that's like a practical one, is like just physically like putting your phone in a different room or something like that where maybe you're still listening to something or maybe you just need that silence, but just having a way that you can, uh, I think, engineer your environment just to be safer for yourself.
Mhm. No, definitely.
Something that changed my life, I think, and this is really when like my sobriety really started to kick off strong was in February last year. Was when, or maybe it was a little bit before that, but basically Vern, or no, it was around February last year. I was struggling. I had some relapses in a row. I was still working with Vern one on one, and I felt like I was just becoming our broken record. And Vern's like, you gotta like put some accountability software like on your phone, on your laptop. And I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. So one of them is accountable to you. You can put the link in the show description. That can like help track like web activity, like if you're looking up stuff. It'll actually send a text or an email to your accountability partner that you set up. So that's a good one. Covenant Eyes. I haven't used it, but I think that's probably one of the more popular ones that's out there.
I think since
Uh,
we have iPhones, I feel like was the reason we didn't go with Covenant Eyes.
Yeah, there's just some things you got to do some research on and look at, but there's like different websites that you can look at. Like if you just type in like accountability software and you Google that, that should like give you some stuff. And I would just say like that's like if you just feel like you're just out of control, you can't like physically like stop yourself. That's a great way just to like just put it in, just take that time just to put it in and set it up, and you'll find like automatically it takes like a lot of that pressure off of you because you're like, oh, now like if I do that, like Noah's gonna know about it. Noah's gonna see exactly what I'm searching, and it might be like I might be like a little bit like, ooh, like Noah be like, what are you looking at, man? But
Yeah.
that's more to be, not to be judgmental, but just I think you can bring some levity into it a little bit. I
And
know we do.
the that's what Vern calls, right, like outsourcing your willpower,
Yeah. Yep.
like taking some of that stuff out of your hands. Because it's like, yeah, like do you just need to sit there like white knuckling it and being like, oh, I'm not gonna, you know, go on incognito mode and look at, and go whatever and go ham.
Right.
Like you can have software that is going to do that for you, and kind of keep, and that's helpful in the beginning. It's so helpful to have as many barriers and padlocks between you and it, rather than like it's so easy at the click of a button. If you have different things that are going to interrupt that process, you'll be able to circumvent that like quick impulse that in the beginning is really strong. That again, there's hope It will wane over time, but yeah, I think that there's these very practical tools that Mac and I are talking about, like, um, so yeah.
Yeah, we could probably list off a million of them, but I think at the end of the day, right, it's tools to combat those threats that you notice. And I think just to bring it all together, like if you're good with it, uh, it's building consistency around this. I think it's a strategy that works. It only works though if you're putting in energy into it, if you're putting in intention into it. If you're linking up with somebody that is on the same wavelength as you, that's a huge thing. I think we talked about this in episode 13, but sometimes it can be like an echo chamber. I know I've been in like groups before to where I'm just like, I don't know, like if this is beneficial to me. Like you might be working with somebody and maybe like they're your best friend, but maybe they're not on the same wavelength as you, and seeing eye to eye with you. That can sometimes be, I don't know if I want to say the word harmful, but it might not be like useful. Like you might be kind of like not using your time wisely. And I think Noah, you said this in episode 13, and I love what you said is like sometimes people will do this and say, "Oh, well, I tried it. It didn't work for me." And I think that's typically like it might be like you didn't really it's not like you didn't try hard enough maybe, but maybe it was just the way that you went about it. Maybe it was with the wrong partner, or maybe it was with like you maybe misplaced intention. So it's kind of finding that sweet spot, and you'll know it when you feel it, because you're gonna feel it. Like when you're doing it, like you're gonna feel the energy, you're gonna feel that positivity. You're gonna start to see the changes happen in your life to where you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, wow, like I'm actually making progress. You're gonna talk to your partner and they're gonna say, you've made progress. Like I can see the man that you're becoming or the woman that you're becoming, and I'm proud of that person, right? And ultimately, you can look in the mirror and you can say, I'm proud of me, right?
Very well said.
Yeah. Well, Noah, just love having you on, man. I'm really proud of you. Incredibly proud of you, man.
Man, proud of you. And this does work, and it has worked. And like, I think on that I Am Sober app, I was able to see after a year that I think I only reset my progress, which is where I count that I relapsed, I think 20 or 25 times, like in the whole year. Um,
That's
so
huge.
the distances and the lengths between relapses got longer and longer. And I think the fast check-ins, they help a ton. It's not the only tool, but it's a way to. It's not the only thing, but it keeps track of all these things. It keeps track of everything, which is great. And it's a way to measure that. So there's a lot of different tools and a lot of different things out there. But I think the coolest part of this is how close it's brought Mac and I together, and it leads to so many, I think, growth in our lives. And as we said, like a time for us to check in and have for each other each day. And the voice memo is a good way to do that too. It's like, because calling is like, hey, you got time, or I don't know if you have time, and I can't call now. We can use there's ways to get around that, and the voice memo is one of them. And you have the dedicated time to listen to, and each other without interrupting. You listen and then you send a complete thought. It's nice. Um, so, but yeah, I've loved being on, Mac. Thanks so much. And yeah, thank you to all the listeners and everybody. Wish you all the best of luck in your journeys. Keep it going. Just don't quit and be persistent. We're all on this together. Mac and I by no means are a finished product at all on this at all. We have not arrived. It's a continual journey.
Well said, Noah. Yeah, just some real quick housekeeping. So one-on-one coaching is kicking off. If you're interested, email me. It's pornfreemillennial@gmail.com. We can meet, quick consultation. It's free, and see if it's right for you. But that's kicking off as coaching, which is really exciting. And then also I've got a Substack and a Medium. Those are publications. You can also go to those if you want like articles that come out. I try to write at least 3 times a week. I'm looking to do more of that too, just to be more helpful. But those are the big mediums to follow there, just for more content. For if you want to, start doing a one-on-one, would love to talk to you. But again, Noah, thank you so much for your time today, man. And what you got a rugby? You got rugby coming up?
Yeah, match tomorrow, man.
All
Yep.
right, man.
Yeah.
Well, good luck in your match. I know you're gonna
Hey,
do great.
you getting out fishing?
So no, I'm gonna be going turkey hunting
Oh
with
yeah.
Z. So and be watching the UFC fights. I am a big UFC fan. It's UFC 300. So it's kind of a big milestone with the company, and it should be really fun to watch. But hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Much love to everybody, and like always, keep fighting the good fight. Talk to y'all later. Bye.